Greetings fellow Earthlings and welcome back to Darlingborough Sci-Fi Builds. It's finally arrived! The parcel that I've ordered before Christmas is finally here, which means hopefully I can finish off all the electronics on my Guyver unit. Now, before I start installing these, I do want to finish off a few little touches on the outside as well, so here's me doing that. One of the things I realised that I need to finish on the unit is one of the larger outer casing pieces. As you can see, the piece that I've overlooked still has the texture of the foam showing through, which just doesn't match the other two larger pieces. I could leave it, but I'll be honest, now that I've noticed it, it is really bugging me, and I just want to make sure that everything looks fairly consistent across all of the units. So I am going to sort that out. The first thing I did was quickly remove it from the unit. I had only pinned it in place temporarily. I then mixed up a batch of decorator's cork and some water, mixed it all together and then smeared it all over the piece of foam. Now, the plan wasn't to fill in any of the gaps, it was just simply to make sure that the outer casing looks nice and smooth when it dries. Once it had all dried, I then repainted it using the Midnight Blue spray paint before applying the Tamiya metallic blue paint with a paintbrush in the same method I'd used before. And now everything matches up lovely. All I need to do now is install it onto the unit. One more thing that I wanted to sort out was the insert on the internal organism. I found that because the insert wasn't actually the correct height, sometimes it would actually sink below where it should do. In order to rectify this, I used a very low-tech solution using some lollipop sticks and some tape to add a few little spacers on the insert. Now the insert will stay exactly where it's supposed to. For the internal organism, I was really happy with the paintwork. It looked absolutely spot on. But one thing I did want is to have a slightly wet looking finish, because I felt that the internal organism would mimic internal organs, and by it being dry it just didn't quite look exactly how I wanted it. I decided to apply Vallejo gloss varnish over most of the model. I wanted the gloss to be very subtle, so I didn't apply a huge amount, only a very thin coat using an airbrush. Even though the gloss varnish by itself was quite thin, I decided to water it down slightly, just using a few drops of water. Once it was mixed, I was able to coat the entire internal organism with the gloss varnish in probably about half an hour. The difference that the gloss varnish has made to the internal organism is night and day. It's only a very small touch that I've applied to this, but I think that it has really tied it all together very nicely. The paint job that I already done was, in my opinion, pretty good already, but with the application of the gloss varnish, it really did pop. It really stood out, and it looks so much more effective. I am so happy that I decided to apply the gloss varnish on top of all of the rest of the paint just to get that extra sheen on the organism. I do think that it works really well, and it'd be also really interesting to know what you think. Let me know in the comments down below. Be interesting to hear your thoughts. Another piece that I wanted to finish off was the control medal. Now, I had sprayed it with a nice chrome finish and it looked really good in the beginning, but it's starting to dull just with the wear and tear and handling as well. I also noticed that around this ring here where I want the light to emit, some of the paint had kind of dripped down when I painted it and it just looked a little bit messy, and I wanted to tidy that up before applying it to the final model. I also wanted to make sure that the nice chrome finish actually matched the piece I was planning on using for the back as well. Now, you won't actually see this piece will be underneath the unit, and it's actually got a magnet inside which connects to the base, which is going to hold it in place. But I still want it to look nice and chrome and shiny as well. The first thing I had to do was remove all of the old paint. Finding some old terps in my shed, I decided to give that a go. Using a cloth and a quick splash of it, it started to remove the paint very quickly and very easily, giving a very nice, clean, smooth finish. I also removed all the paint from the back sphere as well, using the same method. I discovered that not all of the paint was coming off, however. There was some slight pieces that were left on there where the paint had settled quite thickly. I decided to try some gel nail polish remover to see if that removed the last of the paint. It did have an effect, although I didn't clear all of it. However, by this point I decided that the paint I had removed and the paint that was left was still fine because I was going to spray paint over it all anyway. Once I had finished removing all the paint as best I could, I then masked up the area where I want the light to emit from on the control medal, and then I gave both the front control medal and the back piece a spray using some chrome spray paint. Unfortunately, spray painting in the middle of January in the UK does have its drawbacks. I don't have a dedicated spray booth here in my shed, and unfortunately I'm basically having to spray outside. Reading the instructions, the spray paint says I should operate in temperatures of 16 to 25 degrees, which sounds lovely. However, I'm actually spraying in temperatures of about -2, which is not ideal. I'm hoping that the temperature is not going to have a huge detrimental effect on the paint finish, because I'll be honest, I don't have time to wait till summer when the temperatures get better, and I can't really spray it indoors either because my missus complains about the smell, which I don't blame her because apparently it stinks. Despite the freezing cold temperatures, I did press ahead, and I have now resprayed the control medal as well as the back piece of the control medal, which appears on the rear of the unit as well. And also I gave the little stand that it's going to sit in a gentle spray as well, just to tie it all nicely together. Hopefully the paint won't freeze or have any detrimental effect, and it will dry as I hoped, but we'll have to wait to see. Have you ever tried to spray anything outside? Have you ever had any good results, bad results? Please let me know in the description down below. I'm probably doing it completely wrong. Fair enough, I put my hands up to that, but I'm literally working with what I have, which is a small table just outside the shed, which is currently covered in frost and snow and ice. And I think I've seen a woolly mammoth out there as well, actually. Now, I have to wait in real time, but through the magic of editing, here we go. Once I had finished respraying the control medal, going back to it, I'll be honest, I wasn't hugely impressed. The finish wasn't as shiny as I had remembered it being the first time that I painted it. I got to a point where I thought that, do you know what, I'm just going to have to accept my fate, and that's going to be the final finish on the model. But then I came across this video by Mechs and Monsters on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the description below. In the video, he describes a different way of creating chrome using graphite powder, and this piqued my interest.
Just keep buffing and buffing and buffing, and you'll literally see it just start to sheen and shine. And Like, that is a proper nice chrome.
Having watched the video several times through, I decided that this might be an alternative method of getting a nice shiny control medal to look how I wanted it. So I gave it a go. Before I let loose on the actual model itself, I decided to do some tests. And what I'll do is I'll publish the results in that in a separate video, so look out for that. But I was really happy with the results, so I decided to press ahead and use the graphite powder to cover the control medal and hopefully get it nice and mirror-like and shiny. After quite a lot of applying graphite powder to the control medal, buffing it out and just generally polishing it up, I have basically ended up with a control medal which I feel really wasn't the effect I wanted, even with the graphite powder. Now, I must be honest, I think that the issue with the graphite powder is down to my application of it rather than the actual technique itself. I started to notice items with highly shiny, polished, reflective surfaces when I was out and about visiting various shops. It made me reconsider the control medal, and I decided that if I really wanted the best results, the best thing to do would be completely start from scratch. As I was putting some of our Christmas decorations away, I had another eureka moment. In the decorations box, I actually found a very large, very shiny and reflective bauble. Unknown to my missus, the bauble very quickly found its way into my collection of bits and bobs, put aside especially for this project. Off camera, I used a rotary tool and carefully cut it in half, only to discover it didn't quite fit over the dome. I spent a frustrating evening playing around to see if I could rework the control medal, and eventually chose to mount the half bauble on a slightly smaller light bulb dome, mounted just inside the outer casing. I used the lid from a bottled fruit drink to diffuse the LED light inside the dome and hot glued it all into place before attaching the entire control medal component into the inner part of the unit, making sure it was aligned with the internal organism. So now that I have completed the outer casing, the control medal and the internal organism, all that's left to do is apply the electronics and let's get this Guyver unit finished. When I ordered my DF player replacement back in December, I actually ordered two, just one as a spare just in case anything happened. I didn't fancy waiting for another 3 to 4 weeks to have to replace it if the worst came to the worst. The first thing I did was I opened the package and gave both DF players just a quick test using a breadboard to make sure that they both worked. Both of them worked fine, which was great, and there didn't seem to be any problems with either of them. It was then time to start connecting all of the wires. Using a soldering iron and some solder, basically I reconnected the speaker and the LED to the same output, which is these ones here. I then soldered all of the connections together as in this diagram. Once all of the connections had been made, it was then time to actually install them into the unit. The push switch I had decided to apply to make sure it was as obscured as possible. Taking a small drill to the unit, I carefully drilled a couple of holes to feed the wires through. Once the outer casing pieces had been replaced, it was pretty much impossible to spot unless you knew you were actually looking for it. One of the things I did notice is that when I leave the power supply connected to the DF player and it's not in use, it does start to cause some issues. The DF player starts to make random noises and sound effects, and I think that that's just one of the glitches of a constant power supply being fed into a device that doesn't really have an automatic off switch. So in order to combat that, I decided that I wanted to include a hidden on-off switch in the unit as well, so that I could prevent power from travelling to the DF player when the unit's not being used. To do this, I drilled a small hole in the side of the battery compartment and using my rotary tool to make sure that the hole was large enough to install the switch. This switch was simply soldered between the positive terminal of the battery compartment and installed into the unit. I then very carefully replaced the batteries and did a quick test of the unit. Success! It worked, and again it was playing the sounds and lights exactly as I had planned. I then finalised the model by dry fitting everything into place before finally attaching it with some hot glue. So, in what feels like my lifetime of work, I can now finally say my Guyver unit is finally complete. So now that it's complete, how do I feel about it? I'll be honest, I absolutely love it. I feel that some of the aspects of it have really worked well. For example, the blue metallic paint on the outer protective shell casing pieces have really worked out incredibly well, and so has the paintwork on the internal biological element of the unit. The control medal looks absolutely lovely, and I'm really pleased that I spent the extra time and effort to make sure that I got the high reflective qualities that I was looking for and didn't settle with the paint job. It's not perfect. There are a few little bits that I'm not 100% happy with. There is stuff that I could probably have done better, but I've got to the point where I need to draw a line and call it finished. Otherwise, I will work on this for the rest of my life. It has taken me a lot longer than I originally planned. I think I planned it for about 3 or 4 weeks as a build, but now it's taken me well in excess of a year. A lot of it has been down to my own procrastination, and I think that that's also added to my frustration on this project. If I was to rebuild this project again from scratch, then there are definitely things that I would look to improve on and also that I would do differently. I did have quite a steep learning curve on this one, and I must admit I'm glad that I went through it all, because now if I was to build it again, then there is definitely techniques that I would use and techniques that I would not use on a new build. Now, it would be really interesting to know your comments on the whole series, on the final Guyver unit as well. Have you enjoyed watching these videos? Do you feel that I have managed to recreate the Guyver unit accurately as depicted in the original manga or anime versions? Or do you think that I've taken too much of a creative license with it? Some people have commented on the size of the unit. Is it too big? Is it too small? Please let me know. All of your comments and feedbacks will be read, and I do respond to every comment down below. I would like to also thank everybody who has been in contact with me. A few people have actually asked me, will I be doing a commission of this piece? And if so, let them know. I am considering it. Obviously, if you are interested in perhaps me putting a commission piece together for you, drop me an email. The email is in the description down below, and let me know. It's certainly something I can discuss with you, and I'll be happy to maybe have a chat with you about that if you are interested in me commissioning a Guyver unit for you. In the meantime, I will be taking a break from the Guyver, and I will be focusing on other science fiction based projects. So don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out, and I will see you again very soon. Thanks for watching.